I'm going to put two boxes on this counter, and neither one of them is about ballistics. Same money, say $100. On the left, that 100 buys you about 200 rounds of .45 ACP. On the right, that same 100 buys you 80 rounds of 10 millimeters, and if you want anything you would actually carry, it buys you 40. Now run that out 5 years for a man who trains a little. $500 a year, which is not a serious budget. It is a modest one. At the end of 5 years, the .45 shooter has fired 5,000 rounds. The 10mm shooter has fired 2,000. Same man, same money, same discipline. One of them is more than twice the shooter, and it had nothing to do with which cartridge is better. That gap is not on any spec sheet. Nobody prints it on a box because you cannot print it on a box. And it is the single most important number in this entire comparison. So today it is 10mm auto against .45 ACP. Head to head, straight through, no cartridge tribalism, and I am keeping score out loud so you can argue with me in real time. Energy, terminal performance, recoil, capacity, what it does to the gun, suppressor work, bear country, cost, and the shelf test. 10 rounds. Somebody is going to win, and I will tell you at the end who it is and exactly which one belongs in your safe. 10 rounds, head to head. Let us see if the chart survives contact with the checkbook. But you need to hear one thing first, because it changes how you watch everything after it. The premise of this fight is a lie, not the numbers. The numbers are fine. The premise. Somebody sold you a rivalry that was never actually a rivalry, and once you see how they did it, you cannot unsee it. Let me say one thing, then I will leave it be. Everything I have picked up behind that counter, how to buy right the first time, what is worth your money and what ain't, I put it all in one book over at buyproven.com. If you want it, it is there. That is all. Now let us get back to it. Real quick, so you know who is talking. I am Emmett Boone. I spent 11 years working warranty returns for a firearms distributor, which means my job was opening the box when somebody mailed a gun back and writing down why. These days I run projects at a custom rifle shop. I am salaried. I do not work commission. I get paid the same whether you buy something or walk out of here, and that is exactly why I can tell you the truth. And here is the filter, and it does not move for either cartridge. Does it work when your hands are cold and the shelf is bare, and will you actually shoot it enough to be good with it? That second half is the one everybody skips. Life or dollars. Both have to vote. Round 1. What problem was each one built to solve? Because this is where the lie starts. John Browning drew the .45 ACP in 1904. The Army had come out of the Philippines with a complaint about handgun performance, ran the trials, and settled on a big, slow bullet. Browning gave them a .45 2-inch projectile weighing 230 grains at about 830 feet per second, and the Army adopted the pistol in 1911. 2 world wars, Korea, Vietnam. It has been in continuous production for more than 120 years, and it has not meaningfully changed. The problem it was built to solve was a man at across-the-room distance. The 10mm came out of a different question entirely. Jeff Cooper, working with Whit Collins and Irving Stone, wanted a cartridge that would give a service pistol rifle-adjacent reach and authority. The Bren 10 launched it in 1983. A .400-inch bullet, 180 grains, moving at 1,300 feet per second. The problem it was built to solve was distance and barriers and animals, things a .45 was never asked to handle. 2 different questions, 2 correct answers. And then the marketing departments got hold of it and started telling everybody the 10mm was here to replace the .45, which was never the design intent and was never true. Round 1 is a draw, and it is the most important draw on this list, because everything after it makes more sense once you accept that these two are not doing the same job. Score is nothing to nothing. Round 2, muzzle energy, and this is where most comparisons start and stop. Standard .45 ACP. 230 grains, about 830 feet per second, lands you right around 350 foot-pounds. Step up to a plus P load, a lighter 185 or 200 grain bullet, and you can reach into the 500 foot-pound range, though you will feel every bit of it. Full house 10 millimeters, 180 grains at 1,300 feet per second out of a 5-inch barrel gives you roughly 675 foot-pounds. 200 grain hard cast is in the same neighborhood. That is not close. That is a 40 to 90% advantage depending on which loads you line up, and it puts a semi-automatic pistol into territory that used to require a Magnum revolver. The 10 millimeter wins round 2, and it wins it decisively, 1-0. Now let me tell you why that number is the least useful true fact in this entire video. Foot-pounds get printed on the box because foot-pounds fit on a box. You cannot print how many rounds a man will fire in a year. You cannot print what those rounds cost him. You cannot print whether the shelf has any. So the industry prints the one number it can and lets you believe it is the one that matters. It is not. It never has been. It is just the only one that photographs well. Round 3. What happens on the far side of the target? Here is the honest engineering of it. The .45 starts wide. It leaves the barrel at .45 2 inches, and it is already bigger than a 10 millimeter will ever get. A good .45 hollow point opens up to somewhere near 9/10 of an inch, and it does it reliably at pedestrian velocities. The 10 millimeter starts narrow at .400 and depends on speed to open. When it opens well, but it has further to travel to get there. And here is the part almost nobody says out loud. Ask what happens when expansion fails, because it does fail. Heavy clothing plugs the cavity, a bone turns the bullet, the hollow point fills with denim and stays shut. When a 10 millimeters fails to expand, you are back to a 4/10 inch hole. When a .45 fails to expand, you are still making a hole almost half an inch wide, because that is what it was before anybody added a hollow point to it. The .45's worst day is better than the 10 millimeter's worst day, and its worst day requires no technology to work. Penetration flips it the other way. The 10 millimeters drives deeper, comfortably past 16 inches in gel with full power loads, sometimes past 18. The .45 tends to land in the 12 to 15 range, which is right inside the window the Bureau's protocol calls for on a human threat, and is not enough when the threat has a skull built like a truck bumper. So round 3 splits. Wider hole and better failure floor to the .45, deeper penetration to the 10 millimeters. I'm scoring it a draw, and I will take the comments. 1-0, 10 millimeters. Round 4, recoil, and the second shot. Newton is not negotiable. Energy that goes forward also goes backward, and the 10 millimeters sends a lot more of both directions. But felt recoil is not a number, it is a signature, and the two cartridges have completely different ones. The .45 is a push. It is heavy and slow, and the gun rolls up and comes back down. The 10 millimeters is a crack. It is fast and sharp, and the muzzle snaps rather than rolls. Here is why that matters more than the total. A push you can drive through. A snap you have to wait out. On a shot timer, competent shooters run a .45 back onto target faster than they run a full house 10 millimeters, even when the raw recoil energy is not that far apart, because they are fighting a different kind of movement. And there is a second cost nobody accounts for: fatigue. 40 rounds of full house 10 millimeters out of a polymer frame is genuinely tiring, and a tired shooter is a sloppy shooter. Which is why almost every 10 millimeter owner I have ever talked to ends up shooting downloaded ammunition on the range, which is .40 Smith & Wesson wearing a costume, and then carrying full power loads he has almost never fired. That gap between what you practice with and what you carry is a real hazard, and it is unique to this cartridge. The .45 takes round 4, 1-1. Round 5, capacity and the size of the gun that holds it. The 10 millimeter case is narrower, and that math shows up in the magazine. The standard full-size 10 millimeter from the big polymer maker gives you 15. The .45 version of the same pistol gives you 13. Down the line it holds up, single stack or double. The 10 millimeters generally buys you a round or two. The trade is what has to be built around it. 37,500 PS, I needs a heavier slide, a stiffer spring, more steel in the right places. Full-size 10 millimeter pistols tend to be beefier than their .45 counterparts, and in the small ones it is worse. Chop a 10mm down to subcompact size, and you get a pistol that is genuinely unpleasant to shoot, and that most owners quietly feed weak ammunition. Meanwhile, the .45 barely notices being shortened. It is a low-pressure subsonic cartridge, and it does not care much about barrel length. Take 2 inches off a .45 and you lose a little. Take 2 inches off a 10mm and you bleed real velocity, which means you gave up the entire reason you chose it. Round 5 to the 10mm on the number, but narrowly, because you pay for those 2 rounds in size. 2 to 1 10mm. Round 6, what the cartridge does to the gun that fires it. And this is the round nobody makes videos about. .45 ACP runs at about 21,000 psi. 10mm runs at 37,500. That is not a small difference. That is nearly 80% more pressure on every locking surface, every frame rail, every time. I do not need to theorize about what that does, because I spent 11 years reading the paperwork. Recoil spring assemblies, frame rail wear, cracked slide stops, and locking block wear on high round count 10mm was a category on my desk. It was never a category for .45s, not once. The .45 complaints were sights, finish, magazines, extractors, things that happen to any gun. The 10mm complaints were the gun getting beaten by its own ammunition. A .45 that gets fed and cleaned will outlive the man who bought it. A full house 10mm on the same schedule will need parts, and you should budget for them. Round 6 to the .45, and it is not close, 2 to 2. Round 7, suppressors. And this is the round that ends the argument for a whole lot of people. Standard .45 ACP, 230 grains at 830 feet per second, is subsonic. It comes that way from the factory. Nobody engineered that on purpose. Sound suppression was not a civilian consideration when Browning drew it. It just happens that the speed of sound is around 1125 feet per second, and the .45 has always run 300 feet per second below it. The 10mm is built around velocity. Most factory loads are supersonic, which means every one of them cracks downrange, and that crack happens whether or not there is a can on the muzzle. The suppressor quiets the muzzle. It cannot do anything about the bullet. Yes, subsonic 10mm exists, and here is the trap. The moment you slow a 10mm to subsonic, you have thrown away the only reason to own a 10mm, and you are now shooting a cartridge that makes less energy than a full power .45 while costing more per round and beating up the pistol harder. The .45 does not just win round 7. It wins it by accident, 120 years before the question existed. 3 to 2, .45. Round 8, bear country. And I am going to be equally honest in the other direction. The 10mm owns this, and there is no argument to have. When the threat is 1,500 pounds in closing, you need something that will go through heavy bone and thick muscle and still reach something that matters. That is penetration and velocity, and the 10mm has both. The .45's 12 to 15 inches is exactly right for a man and exactly wrong for a brown bear. If you spend real time in big country, this round outweighs every other round in the video by itself, and you should stop watching and go buy a 10mm. I mean that. But I want you to be honest with yourself about how often that is actually you. The 10mm get sold to 100 men for every one who will ever stand in front of an animal. That is not the cartridge's fault. That is the marketing. Round 8 to the 10mm, 3 to 3, and we are tied going into the last 2. Round 9, what it costs to get good. And now we are back to those 2 boxes I put on the counter at the start. Practice .45 runs somewhere around 50 cents a round. Practice 10mm is $1.25 and up, and anything you would actually carry or hunt with is $2 and change. $500 a year, 5 years, and it is 5,000 rounds against 2,000. I told you that number at the start, and I want you to sit with it now that you have seen the other 9 rounds, because none of them move it, and I can show you what that looks like on the trade-in rack, because I keep track. 4 10mm pistols came across my counter as trade-ins this year. I checked every one of them, because that is a habit I never broke. Not one of them had 200 rounds through it. Rifling factory sharp. No wear on the feed ramps at all. One of them still had the bore snake in the box, still sealed in the plastic. In that same 12 months, I took in 9.45s, and every single one of them was used up. Finish worn off the muzzle from a holster. Recoil springs tired. One had the checkering polished smooth by a man's hand over a lot of years. Nobody trades a 10mm because they wore it out. They trade it because they never shot it. And nobody trades a .45 because they hated it. They trade it because they used it up and went and bought another one. That is the whole argument sitting on a rack, and there is not a ballistic number anywhere in it. This is the round the energy chart cannot see. The 10mm advantage is measured in foot-pounds. The .45's advantage is measured in repetitions, and repetitions are what actually decides how a bad night goes. Round 9 to the .45, 4-3. Round 10, the shelf test. And this is my filter's whole first half. When the shelves went bare in 2020, I watched the sequence in real time. The exotics went first. 10mm was early to disappear and late to come back. .45 ball held on longer than almost anything and came back sooner, and the reason is not that it is better. It is that it is boring. Boring cartridges do not get panic bought. Everybody who wanted a 10mm already had 4 boxes, and everybody who wanted .45 just bought it when they needed it. Every major manufacturer loads .45. Every retailer stocks it. Brass is everywhere, reloading components are everywhere, and the low pressure means the cases come back 5 and 6 times. The 10mm depends on a much thinner supply chain and a smaller set of loaders, and thin supply chains are the first thing to snap. Round 10 to the .45. Final score 5-3, .45 ACP. Now here is the rule my answer breaks, and this is the part that is going to fill the comments. This hobby says buy for the worst case. Buy for the bear, buy for the barrier, buy for the day. Everything goes wrong at once, because you cannot unbuy the wrong choice when it happens. That sounds like wisdom. It has been repeated so many times that nobody checks it anymore. It is wrong, and I am going to tell you why. Buying for the worst case only works if the worst case is the thing that is most likely to hurt you. It is not. The thing most likely to hurt you is being unpracticed, and buying for the worst case makes you unpracticed, because the cartridge that handles the emergency is the cartridge you cannot afford to shoot. You are trading a real everyday deficiency for a theoretical rare advantage, and you are calling it prudence. Buy for the Tuesday, not the apocalypse. The Tuesday is where you actually live. So here is the call. If you spend real time in bear country, buy the 10mm and do not think twice about it. That is what it was designed for, and nothing else does it as well. If you run a suppressor, buy the .45 and stop reading forms. And if you are like almost everybody watching this, which is a man who wants one good pistol for the house and the truck and the range, buy the .45 ACP. It gives you a wider hole on its worst day, a softer recoil signature, a longer-lived gun, and twice as many repetitions for the same dollar. I know some of you wanted the 10mm to take this. I get it. I really do. On the chart, it is the smarter cartridge, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But strip the tribalism off both of them, and the numbers only point one way, because ammunition you cannot afford to train with is ammunition that fails you, and a pistol you shoot twice a year is a pistol that fails you. That is not opinion. That is just math. And if you already own one of them, hear me on this. You do not need the other one. Nobody has ever been failed by either of these cartridges in a way the other one would have fixed. Take the money you were going to spend on the second pistol and spend it on ammunition for the first one. That is the single highest return purchase in this entire hobby, and nobody sells it because nobody makes money on it. Training beats gear every time. The most important tool you own sits between your ears and your trigger finger, and no cartridge on earth corrects for a man who has not fired his pistol since last spring. The 10mm beats the .45 on paper. Paper does not shoot back. Buy proven, not hyped. Buy the cartridge that stays on the shelf when things get ugly. And buy the one you will actually go out and shoot. All right, your turn. What are you carrying right now and why? And did I score any of those 10 rounds wrong? Drop it in the comments. No judgment, no brand loyalty, no tribalism. Just tell me straight. And yeah, tell me what I left out. I already know somebody is typing about the .460 Roland conversion. I read everyone. The comment scraps are half the fun. Next time we take the one this video sets up. 9mm against both of them, and whether 20 years of bullet technology quietly made this whole argument obsolete. That one is going to start a bigger fight than this one. Shoot straight, buy proven, and I will see you at the counter.